Hello and welcome to another 5-minute tech tip with Dave Casuto and SF Tech Training. This is going to be a Photoshop tutorial, possibly part 1, part 2, and maybe part 3 on creating something from scratch, and namely how to create a banner of some kind. Maybe it's going to be an ad that you have to post onto a website, onto your website. Maybe it's going to end up someplace in a newsletter, but it has to be a particular size, and that's what's important here. So we start off with this welcome screen in Photoshop, and all I'm going to do is either say File, New, you can do Control or Command N, or you can even say here is Create New, and it takes you to this dialog box where you can say, okay, well, what size is it going to be? Right, and you can see they have a bunch of presets here depending on what you want to do. You can check those out, like notice here is web, and you'll also notice that the unit of measure here is pixels. If you do print, notice the unit of measure here is in inches. Okay, and if you go here to photo, you can see here is inches, mobile, etc. You'll kind of check all those out. Okay, and then also you can save presets, we'll talk about in just a second. Right, so I know for a fact what it's going to look like, right? And if you're thinking about the web, you're going to be thinking in pixels. So if you come over to here, we're going to say pixels, and I know exactly the size it's going to be, right? So it's going to be 400 wide, and the height is going to be 250 pixels. All right, now the resolution, if it's going to be on the web, you really want to think about the resolution, and typically it's going to be 72. Right, you might want to check in with your web people, but most likely it's going to be 72. If it's going to print, you want probably 300 or higher. Right, so I'm just going to leave it just like this, keep it simple for us. I'm going to click on Create. And there you go, and I have this exactly how I want it to. Let's go ahead and right click up on top here, and I want to make it so my unit of measure reflects what's on here. For whatever reason, it decided to stay in with inches, so I just right clicked on the ruler, make sure the ruler is up, go to view and say rulers, and then now this is all set for me to bring in my content. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring in just kind of I'm going to do either a basic shape so I can draw it out, or I'm going to use an adjustment layer. I'm going to show you how to do both of those things. Okay, so basic shapes, very easily, if you right click over here, I'm just going to draw out a rectangle. And you'll notice that as soon as I click on rectangle, I have all these options here in terms of like, well, what do you want to do in terms of any color, right? I can do a solid color, I can do a gradient, okay, there's patterns you can do, etc. So let me just choose like this kind of like charcoal gray, and I'm just going to kind of overdraw it, and then wait for it, and then there it is, and it's on the layers panel. I'm just going to call this BG for background. And if I decide I want to change it, I can just come up to here and then change the color again. Let's make it maybe a little bit of a darker color, and there it is. Right? And then you're all set. Okay? Now if I decided I wanted to do a gradient, I could very easily click on that, and now notice it changes to a gradient, and a whole bunch of other things come up. All these gradient presets, right? If I can click on this, and notice how that changes. I'm going to come back to here, go to that. Maybe you want to do a different type of gradient. This is a linear gradient. I'm going to choose a radial gradient. Okay, maybe I like that. And then maybe I want to reverse the gradient. So you can see lots and lots of options for you to work with. All right, now with gradients, you have the option of also maybe changing, well, I want a little more black in there. Okay, and you notice what that does. Okay, so I'll just keep this for now, just so we can kind of play around with it. Excuse me, I didn't want to do that. So I'm just going to bring this back, and I'm going to double click on this and just choose black, so you can see if you ever want to add on a gradient stop, it's as easy as that. All right, so now let me go ahead and bring something in, and I'm going to very easily just bring in an image. So I'm going to say place embedded, and let's go into this folder, and I'm going to bring in maybe this logo here. And that pops right in, and I can move it around however I want to. And you can see it's starting to come together. All right, now I decided, you know what? I really don't like what I did, because now that I notice my logo is not really coming together, I can come back to this. And this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on this, and I'm able to see there's my gradient fill that just popped up. And I can now make this whatever color I want. Okay, you can see that. I click on the drop down, and then I've got all kinds of other options here as well. I'm going to keep it just like this. So now I can say, oh, you know what, white's probably a better option for me now. All right, fantastic. So I love this. This is now my Google Cloud. That's wonderful. And now the next thing I want to do is maybe bring in something that kind of like masks this, not masks this, but frames this a little bit. So I'm going to use another rectangle. And I'm going to draw this just like that. But you're going to see what it's going to do. It's going to cover it. So this is kind of layers 101. I want this to be underneath it. So it kind of masks it like that. It frames it like that. And I'm going to make the opacity come down slightly like that. And I'm going to change the color to something else. So let me go ahead now and choose one of the colors that are in here. So this is pretty cool. I'm going to click on this. And now my color picker appears. And when I move my mouse off of all these colors, I can now choose a color from what's on the canvas. And now I get that nice pretty blue color to frame this. Okay? So I'm going to stop here. This is going to be part one. And what we've done is we just created a new document from scratch. We brought in some images. We brought in a background. Okay? And what I'm going to show you next is how we can bring in text, and also another way, let's say we didn't want this background, how we could do it in a slightly different way that links into the background, and also just working with some basic text. All right, so come back to part two on this, and we'll see you in the next movie. Feel free to like this, subscribe, send us any feedback or thoughts, and you can also visit the website, sftechtraining.com, and check us out there, but we'll see you in the next video, I hope.